Hi, I'm Tom Elliott, founder of OcuRoute, and I'm pleased to be sponsoring this podcast. If you need help taking control of your CI/CD pipelines, come see us at ocuroute.com.
Hey, it's Dan Melnick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zing, and I'm proud to be a sponsor of this podcast. So please check us out today so we can help fuel your business growth. myzing.io. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Little. I'm the Director of Counselling and Education at EmpoweringAwareness.Asia, and I'm a proud sponsor of this podcast.
Yeah, hi, yeah, hi, Ardemis. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Hi, Sai. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor.
So I've gone through your profile. I can see you're doing, you have done a lot of work. You have done research. You are being in education from long time. I thought to tell about your work to my audience. So can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Ardemis Boghossian. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I did my studies on chemical engineering for my bachelor's, originally from University of Michigan, my PhD in chemical engineering at MIT, and my postdoc also in chemical engineering at Caltech. And during this time, I've done research in different areas. I looked at synthetic nanomaterials. I do biological engineering. And right now, so I'm a professor. I started my group in 2015 at EPFL. And what we do is our research group combines different areas. So we do biological engineering and nanomaterial engineering. We combine these areas for different technologies, including biomedicine and energy technologies as well.
So you're from?
Sorry?
You're from?
Oh, so I'm originally from Michigan. I was born and raised in Michigan, and lived in the U.S. actually my whole life until I moved out to Switzerland in 2015 to start my research group.
So what made you to come into chemical engineering?
Well, to be honest, I've always liked math and science and physics. And when I was a bachelor, I really liked the fundamental sciences. But I wanted something that did everything. So if I went into math, I wanted to do more chemistry. And so actually I looked at chemical engineering and I figured it actually combined all the things I'd like to do. So it had engineering, so it has math and physics. But compared to other engineering disciplines, it also had chemistry. And so it combined each of the different areas that I liked. An advantage of chemical engineering was also the job prospects. So when debating as an engineer, a chemical engineer, you have a much more competitive chance, at least at the time when I was studying, to find a position. And you could do the same work that you would do in chemistry, but probably with a higher salary. So I liked a bit the idea that I could do the things that I like to do. And if I don't end up in academia, I also had promising opportunities in industry.
So I can see you want to be a revolutionary. You want to help Switzerland, especially when it comes to this industry, the chemical engineering. So what ideas that you have that you think that needs to be changed and that you wanted to make change in Switzerland with the education that you have in chemical engineering?
So for me, the Switzerland at the time I ended up, so it's not specific to Switzerland. I want to make changes for the whole world. And at the time I came to Switzerland because when I was looking for faculty positions, it was a position that seemed to have offered everything we needed to get started in this area. And the changes I want to make is related to, for example, for health and also for energy and also teaching. So for me, the way I see in Switzerland, there was an opportunity to do high risk research. And when I started my project, it was very risky. People weren't sure it was going to work and it required a lot of investment. In Switzerland, I was able to find an opportunity, people who are willing to invest in my research that was high risk at the time. And so now after 10 years, we've gotten a lot of our technologies, we were able to demonstrate that they work. And the next step that I want to do, which I think goes with what you asked about having an impact, is starting companies, translating the technology into something that could end up in your home. So this is where we are going to try to make a change.
So what is chemical engineering and how it is, being taken place in the world?
So that is a very good and complicated question. So the funny thing is, when I started as a chemical engineer, I didn't exactly know what a chemical engineer did. I just thought chemical and engineering. I said, okay, I like these areas. Actually, so the traditional chemical engineering is, so in chemistry, let's say you create a new product, you create shampoo, you create a pharmaceutical drug, you do it in the laboratory. But when you want to make tons of this stuff and you want to distribute it to everyone in the world, you have to scale up the production. You're not going to be making chemicals in a little vial. So what a chemical engineer does, the traditional chemical engineer, is that they scale up chemical synthesis. So for example, a lot of these companies where you buy soaps, shampoo, detergents, medicine, usually a chemical engineer is involved in building the chemical plant. They do calculations to see how big the reactor has to be. So this is traditional chemical engineering. Chemical engineers are also very prevalent in the petroleum industry. So for example, the process for making fuels, converting a crude oil into something you could put in your cars, that's what chemical engineers do. They scale up these processes, they make them as efficient as possible. This is in industry, but chemical engineers have actually since expanded. Chemical engineers, they know a little bit of everything. So they've adapted and assumed different roles. So in research, for example, chemical engineers do the same thing as physicists, as electrical engineers, as material scientists. We could make devices. We do the same kind of research. And so the chemical engineering role has actually expanded a lot from the traditional role of just scaling up synthesis to basically, could find chemical engineers in IT positions. You could find chemical engineers in material science positions. And so we're a bit of an adaptive engineering group.
So what's your PhD subject?
So my PhD subject was on basically optical sensors. So these are sensors that, so when you want to detect an analyte, for example, glucose for people who have diabetes, for example, they prick their finger, they put blood on a test strip, and it tells them what their sugar level is. This is usually an electrical sensor. We're making sensors that are optical, so there's no wires. All you do is shine light. So the idea would be that you take an optical sensor, you put it under your skin. There's no wire sticking out. And if you ever want to take a measurement, you just shine light on it, and you get a light that comes back, and it tells you what your analyte is. So my PhD was on engineering these kinds of sensors.
So, I mean, you have done a lot of study in this subject. You have spent a lot of time also. So, spending this much of time, these many years in this subject, like what you have understood, how this chemical engineering is, creating impact and helping humanity in whole globally.
So the chemical engineering, a lot of the advancements is actually in energy. So as I mentioned, traditionally chemical engineers, they do a lot of work traditionally in the oil industry. And now with the strong push towards renewable energy sources, a lot of the chemical engineers use the same skill sets they have, but for renewable sources. So instead of making fuel from crude oil, can we make fuel from plants? That's another area of research. And so they've led a lot in this area, but chemical engineers are more than just energy, and they're more than just doing synthesis. So for example, if you want to make something that usually requires toxic chemicals, chemical engineers try to find a new way to make it without using toxic chemicals. But they have, as I mentioned, chemical engineers also try to have impact in other areas. One of them is also in health and medicine. The way chemical engineer thinks, so every discipline has a way to think. We joke, for example, that the physicists they always draw everything as a circle or a square. This is a cow, and they draw a circle, and they do free body diagrams. Mathematicians, they think of proofs. Chemical engineers, the way we think of things is we draw a box around everything, and we see what goes in and what goes out. And then what happens in the middle doesn't matter. And so with this way of thinking, we try to engineer new technologies that are efficient. So we approach this approach to try to make synthesis that's efficient, and also for healthcare devices, can we use a different perspective without going into the details of the biology if we want to find a solution at the end.
So have you understood how these chemicals are created?
Some of them yes, some of them no. So there was a quote, I forgot who mentioned, when you're able to really understand something, you can predict something and you can control it in a manner. And so we can do that to some extent. So when we understand the mechanism of how a chemical is created, we say, okay, this is how it's created. Because we know it's created this way, we could do it a little better. So you know how to engineer it to make it produce more of the chemical more efficiently. Some mechanisms for producing a chemical, we don't know. And so there are different ways to do it. There are some people who are focused on trying to understand how it works. So once you understand how it works, you can make it better. And there are some people that say, I don't care how it works. I just want to make more of it. So they try different things until they make more of it. So it depends on what kind of chemical you're synthesizing. And sometimes, you take the engineering approach, which is just getting it to be good enough for what you want. And sometimes you take the scientific approach. You want to understand how it works so that you could take a more rational approach to making more of this chemical more efficiently.
So have you understood all these physical things that you're observing and that are there on on the universe, doing the research and understanding the chemicals and its engineering behind all the physical things? I mean, have you understood do you think that there is a creator behind this creation?
That's a deeper question. So to be honest, I've never mixed the two ideas about creation versus not creation. So in terms of the research that we do, we are on, I guess, the more scientific aspect. We try to understand how it works. So I like to think that we made progress in understanding how these sensors, like we work with sensors, for example. We find out when we add a chemical, we get a light response. And we try to understand, why is the light responding? And then we sometimes have some insight. We say, okay, it's maybe due to this, maybe due to this, and we narrow it down. In terms of, the idea of creation versus science, actually, I'd never see it as one versus the other. Usually that question doesn't come up because they're totally different questions. Science asks the question, how? And I think in terms of creation, the question that's being asked is why? These are different questions. And so there's no overlap in that sense, I feel.
So what kind of questions that your students ask you as a professor?
When am I going to graduate? The questions they ask are always actually the toughest questions because they ask questions because sometimes you're in the field for a long time and there's things that you just, over time you've accepted. And they ask sometimes questions that you've just accepted all along. And then you have to sit back and think, actually, that's a good question. Why is it? So sometimes they say, why does it behave like this and not like this? And you think, oh, it could technically behave that way. Why doesn't it? So they sometimes ask questions about mechanism. Well, why does it work this way? And then you could say, oh, maybe it works this way, or how does it work would be a more accurate question. How does it work? And so they could, and so those are the kind of questions I get from my students in terms of trying to understand. But that's part of their PhD, is trying to figure out, is it possible to work this way, or is it not possible to work this way, and how does it work?
Oh, you have 3 different degrees.
I have 2. So I have bachelor and I have PhD. In the US, it's common. In Europe, it's seen as very weird because in Europe, most people graduate with a master's degree. So when I tell them, oh, I never got a master's degree, I just went straight to a PhD, they look at me like they're very surprised. So I didn't end up getting a master's because I think I knew I wanted to get a PhD. So I just kind of skipped that step.
So you're pursuing your PhD now.
So I finished my PhD in 2012. So
Okay.
and right now I'm giving PhD to my students.
Okay, you look so young. So I think
You're too nice. Thank you.
yeah, and so you have done two different degrees in chemical engineering, and uh, uh, now you are a scientist, and now you're contributing to the whole industry, and you are helping the country today. I mean, you are telling something that actually happening in the real world. So how these different phases in your life that you, when it comes to your subject called chemical engineering, like studying uh, uh, and the evolution in your life, learning these in different phases. How do you define this, and how you are contributing to the society?
Well, to be honest, so each of these phases, I feel like my whole life was about bringing me to where I am today. They say in terms of, you look for purpose. Everybody, and there's different ways of how you see purpose. Some people, they see purpose as living a happy life. And others see it different ways. So for me, I want to have an impact. I want to matter. I want people to notice when I'm not here, once I go. So I want to, and there are different ways I could do this, right? It's not just through science, but I thought I was pretty good at science. So that, for me, that was the way I could do that. And so I ended up, so my studies, my bachelor, my PhD, my postdoc, and now this lab, for me, I see it as finally I could have an impact. Maybe I could make a drug, or even if I cure one person, I changed somebody's life. This is a big deal. If I wasn't here, their life would be very different. So this is my passion. And now how I'm trying to make that a reality is, so we finally did our research. We found technologies that work. Now I want to start commercializing it. I want people to start using it. We found one way for diagnosing diseases. If we could find somebody, for example, who has pancreatic cancer, if we catch it early on, most people who, by the time they find out they have pancreatic cancer, it's too late. So the main cure is catching it early on. So if I make a sensor that could detect this, and we find it early enough that we can treat it, that's somebody's life that we can save. So for me, everything that has gone through my journey is to have this impact. One thing I noticed though is that, life has a different turn. For me, it was always science. When I moved to Switzerland, I found, I think, another kind of purpose that I never really planned for, that I didn't realize was a problem, related to kind of academic conduct and gender issues. And it was something that I never, I knew it was an issue, but never thought much about. But now I'm realizing that there are other ways that I could also have an impact and change the world, not only through science.
So it's ready to market.
Sorry?
The drug that you have created is ready to market now.
It's ready to, sorry?
Market. You are ready to market it. You want to commercially sell it in the market.
Yeah, so we've already patented some of our technologies, and the good thing about it is that they're technologies that I think that are cost effective, and they're ones that I think will be able to have a big impact.
So it's going to be expensive.
No, it's going to be cheap. So the idea is, and the idea is that it would be able to replace some of the current technologies that are more expensive and more specialized. So we're trying to, this is for our biomedicine. We also have technologies for energy, which is also cheap. So right now, one of the technologies we develop is making electricity from wastewater. Usually, when you get dirty water in the power plant, they put a lot of electricity and energy to clean up the water. We engineer bacteria that can eat the waste in the water and produce electricity from it. So we solve two problems. Something that can treat wastewater And instead of putting electricity in, we're getting electricity out. So this is a technology, for example, that's especially exciting for developing countries where they don't, because wastewater treatment requires a lot of energy. This is something where we could help provide clean water and also produce energy. So this is something where, I think having clean water is something that's basic, that everyone should have access to. And so this is and it's a cheap technology because it uses bacteria. You just take a little of the bacteria that we engineered and it will grow by itself. And so this is something that we're hoping to bring to the people.
What is the second one?
Sorry?
What is the second one?
So this is the energy technology. And the second technology we work on is on health. So this is to make a sensor so that will tell you if you have a disease or not. So the idea is, let's say COVID came out in 2020. Let's say tomorrow there's a new disease outbreak that comes out. So what we would normally have to do is we have to wait until the pharmacy makes a new COVID test strip for this new disease. And then you go, you buy it, and you check to see if you have the new disease. The other technology we're interested in is that we have something that could detect every disease, a single device that collects all the information about your body, your blood. And anytime a new disease comes out, so it gives you a signal. You just download from the internet to see if your signal matches the signal of that disease. So anytime there's a new disease, you have basically a fingerprint. Everybody has a unique fingerprint, a unique reaction in their body. And then anytime there's a new disease, you use this device to see what your fingerprint looks like. And you download from the internet a laboratory that does tests, and they tell you, yes, you have the disease, no, you don't have the disease. So imagine you stay at home and you have a device and you never have to leave the house. And anytime there's a new disease, you just have to download the pattern of that disease, the fingerprint of that disease, and then you could check if you have it or not. So this is the other technology, is basically a sensor for everything. And to check whether you have a disease or not, you just download and you match your sensor to see if you have it or not. And this is also one where, we hope that we'll be able to help people, especially if there are outbreaks.
How effective it is?
We don't know yet. We're trying to get human samples. So we've already have most of the hardware and working on software, but we need a lot of data. So for example, it's a technology where you have many, many kinds of sensors. And you need to find patterns. Like if somebody has COVID and diabetes, or somebody has COVID and high triglycerides, every person is different. But you want to know if they have COVID or not. But the problem is COVID is combined with other things. So if we take samples from thousands of different people, we could start to see the pattern that's related to COVID. So then right now, we don't know yet if it works because we need to get a lot of samples from patients. So we're looking to collaborate with doctors and hospitals to try to get samples from people so that we could see how accurate we are to diagnose them if they have a disease or not.
You started doing the experiment? You started collaborating already with the...
Not yet. So it's one of the challenges is we've actually had a bit of a bottleneck here trying to build these collaborations. And so that's why, we're looking for opportunities to try to collaborate with people with this kind of background to get this kind of data.
If someone who has that ability to give that support, like if they are listening to this conversation from anywhere on this planet, they can be from government or they can be from different countries, doctors.
Yes.
So do you have words to them? Like you want to say anything to them?
I just want to say, if you work in this area, we'd really appreciate patient samples. So, we're interested in our technologies, urine samples, saliva, blood. This is, I think, an exciting chance so we work with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And if there are people out there who have access to samples, are willing to collaborate, our doors are always open. And so we'd be really eager to work with you. And I think it's something we can do that will have a really big impact.
And what about the electricity that you are generating from the wastage? So how effective that is?
So that one, the efficiency is not very high. But the good news is, well, I don't know if it's good news, it depends on your perspective, but right now it's still better than what there is, because right now people put electricity in to treat the wastewater. So even if we only get a small amount of electricity out, it's better than what it is before. So this one we are interested in scaling up. We have some collaborators, but we're looking more for investment funding to be able to do a prototype. And so we're trying to apply with collaborators. So if there are also people out there who are interested in wastewater treatment and are looking for a partner, especially if you work in wastewater industry, to demo this prototype. So this is a fuel cell that can produce electricity from bacteria using wastewater. You know, we're also really excited to test out our devices with you. So especially if you have wastewater that's very rich in organic waste, for example, for making cheese, chocolate, wines, you know, let us know. We'd be interested in testing out your wastewater as well.
So how much investment that these two projects needs, and what is the time that you need in order to make this available and help for the humanity?
So for the wastewater, once we have a prototype, actually, I think we'll be able to start implementing it within a year. So it'll take about a year probably to build our prototype, a year and a half. And then the good thing about this technology is it's easy to scale up. So I just make one fuel cell, and when we see how well it works, if I want to treat a lot of water, I just take the same fuel cell and I hook them up next to each other. So it's easy to scale up. So that one, once we have the prototype, should take about a year and a half or so to build, and then after that, there's nothing to keep us from entering the market. The health technology will take longer because, as you might imagine, you need this to be accurate. You don't want mistakes with people's health, especially if you have a false negative where you say somebody doesn't have something when in fact they do have something, and then you miss an opportunity to treat someone and save their life early on. So this, initially, once we get enough samples, this is something that I would see happening probably on like a 10-year timeline. By the time we validate with patients, and we check for patterns, and we check for robustness. And I would imagine we would actually have to do different validations for different diseases. But this is where I hope we have a collaboration with people who have a bit more experience working with clinical applications, to perhaps they know a more efficient ways of getting a technology to the market.
So you have mentioned earlier that you want to matter in the world and you want to create an impact. So how much knowledge that you have in chemical engineering that you think that you can able to help humanity or any species? How much you have understood about chemical engineering and how it is actually, how important it is to the world to understand, and what you can able to do it if you get an opportunity from any country or any government, or if organizations are wanting to collaborate with you, like what information that you have in whole.
So I think I guess what makes me a bit unique in this, so I think the same way as you, I want to have an impact and I want to do something that I know nobody else can do, or at least not at this point. And I think the uniqueness aspect is my knowledge with bioengineering and synthetic nanomaterials engineering. So a lot of times the people in disciplines, they stay in one area. So my PhD was in nanotube photophysics. So I have a background in understanding this kind of phenomena and making devices, optoelectronics. This is very physics related area. My postdoc was in biological engineering. This requires a very different kind of thinking. A lot of them, so in physics, you understand everything and you build up. Biology, you don't understand what's happening, but you still have to get it to work. And so that's what I try to leverage is both my understanding of biological engineering and optoelectronics, and there aren't many people in the world that can do both.
Are you philosophical?
Yes, kind of, but not professionally, just
So
existentially.
your philosophy connects with the science the science and the engineering knowledge that you have.
Sorry?
The philosophy in you, is that connects in the science and the engineering knowledge that you have.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, as I mentioned, I think it serves a purpose. I think I could do something that others that will let me matter. And it also started off with me trying to understand the world.
So do you do you follow international news? Uh, I mean, the chemicals that we are trying to find in the Mars or Moon or, out of the planet.
Oh, I do. I'm excited by it. So what's interesting is the bacteria I mentioned that produces electricity.
Yeah.
There's a really exciting application for using that in space, because this bacteria actually does photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is a process that takes in light and produces energy, food for a plant. And so the idea is, if we could launch these into space, maybe we could start something exciting up there.
So if the space technology related people or space industry experts watches this, they are listening to you.
I've had it seems like I've had some contacts with people who work in the space industry, and they're very interested. And we're also interested in collaborating. So we have these bacteria. They take in solar energy and they produce electricity. And we're also interested in using these bacteria to take in solar energy and produce chemicals. Chemicals that, well, I call them chemicals, but it could be food, it could be other materials. We call everything a chemical, even if it's not a scary material. And so if there's people who have interest in space technologies, this is something that has really exciting applications as well, and we'd be interested in moving that direction.
And what's your confidence that, what impact and what change that you can do, and how you can able to be useful for the next generation?
So I think the impact and change for me, as I mentioned, the technologies that we're developing, when I started, nobody was working in this direction. And they told me it was very risky, and it requires biology and training, and also physics training. And now actually there are people that are starting to follow us in this area, which I think is a really good thing, because it means that they see potential. And so already I think there's already been a lot of impact I could see just by shaping the field. And then I see brilliant scientists going in this direction too, coming up with their own new ideas. And I think this is also really good. You don't want just one person thinking in their same way. And so I think that's the big impact, is opening a field that didn't exist before. And the technologies that enables are things that have direct effect. It has effect on where you get your energy, effect on your health. It will tell you, if you have a disease or not. This is, we can't have more of an effect than this. This is where I see the impact that I've had.
What are the resources that you go through in order to leverage your knowledge in chemical engineering?
Other people. I learn from other people. So we have there's like a Google search engine to read people's papers. So I read other people's papers. I try to learn what they learn. So that's a big source of knowledge, is just learning from others. And actually, that's probably the main source. Talking to people also at conferences is also another source. You only know what, it's a bit of a balance. You want to make sure you understand, know how people are thinking, and maybe you come up with your own ideas as well. But you also want to do something different. So if you could build on that knowledge and kind of go in a different direction, especially not only in your area, but outside your area, that's where the most exciting ideas come from.
You took very challenging topic and subject. Actually, not many people believe that actually is going to work. And world is collection of different geographical locations and different climatic conditions and different time zones. So I mean, did you do research and have you understood or read the articles or, have gone through the information which belongs to different countries in chemical engineering in order to be a global species?
Definitely. All the papers I read are from all over the world. When we access these papers, we have research institutions in the US, in Europe, in China, in India, and Korea, everywhere. Science, what I love about science is there's no politics. At least at the scientific level, the politics might try to, but when you see people working in the lab, you see people from different countries. My lab is very international. I've had people from all over the world. And I've read articles from people publishing in other research groups, and their research groups are also from people all over the world. And so there's a common language, and I think everyone's a bit driven to have an impact, and we collaborate. We don't care, the different countries people are from. If you could do this, work with me. Let's get this thing to work. This is kind of there's a blindness. In my experience, there's a blindness to where people are, but in a good sense, because you just want to work with everyone to achieve your goal of making a new technology.
So this is the $1,000,000 question that world is running on. I want, as a scientist, as a philosopher, as an expert, what's your observation about light speed? And can we as human beings can able to achieve that?
So this is a bit outside my area. It goes more to the main physics. At least what we're taught by the textbook is basically we could never achieve it. And then there's some theory about, but this has implications for time and also implications for entropy. I feel like I'm not qualified to share, what my opinion is on it because I don't go, but this is at least what we're taught in the textbooks is we can achieve it. This is an upper limit, but I know that this is up for discussion. But I feel, as I mentioned, I'm not qualified to go into too much detail in the discussion, and I'd be happy to discuss with someone, whoever is more proficient, some ideas I have on the topic. But as I mentioned, I haven't done enough research on that area to really have contribute much.
So anything that needs to travel with with light speed, the mass actually matters. The mass is something which is a collection of chemicals. So just ask you because physics is connected with chemistry. So I wanted to know your opinion. That's it.
Yeah, even the idea of mass. So so this is a different area of physics where I do a bit more photophysics, which is physics of that's related to the fluorescence. Is a bit more specialized. But even this whole idea of mass. So this is something we learned in bachelor's in our bachelor's physics 1 class, and we went through some of the theories, physics 1, physics 2, and even they only teach us things about mass, and then after a while, you learn about antimatter. This is something they don't teach you in any of your foundational physics. What is antimatter? What is antimass? And so this is something where I think physicists that are much more specialized in that area would probably have a lot more, something heavier to say about the topic than I could. But so I am aware of it, but I don't know the details of what the state of the art is in the field and what's the current line of thinking. And this is where, as I mentioned, I have to learn from other people.
So these space companies, NASA or SpaceX, that are trying to find something from nothing, do you go through them? Do you see what they are doing research in the space, when it comes to chemical engineering?
So I went to a talk recently of someone who's trying to look for life in space through chemicals. So this is a talk where there's a hypothesis. So people believe, so there's basic chemicals that have a very simple structure, like methane gas is a very simple chemical. You have 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens, and it's shaped. And then there are chemicals that are much more complicated that only so far we've observed only living materials can make, only humans can make, only bacteria can make. So this scientist, so this is where they merge a bit chemistry with space and life, is trying to look for in space signatures of chemicals that they believe can only be made by living material. So if they find this chemical on a planet, they say, well, this chemical can't be made from nothing. It has to be bacteria or something making it. So there are people that are doing research in this area. As I mentioned, I'm not an expert in it. I just went to somebody's talk and I thought this was a pretty cool approach. For me, the whole idea about life and space, as I mentioned, it's not my area of research, but just a personal reflection. I think of how big space is. I like to think of probability. I've always loved math growing up. And for me, I think just by statistics, there's at least going to be somewhere else, even if you consider all this to be by chance, it has to be somewhere else as well. For me, the greatest anomaly is not the fact that there could be life in space, but is the fact that you exist, that I exist. Because our existence, I think, is more improbable than finding another planet, because our existence is unique. It's not only about the DNA. Like if you have two identical twins, these are two different people. Their DNA is identical. So you have to think of having the exact same DNA. What are the chances of all the molecules coming in to form this person? And it's not only about your DNA, but it's also about your experiences. So two identical twins are different people because they have different experiences. Their brains are wired differently because of their different experiences. And so their existence is unique, not because of their DNA only, but because they existed at this exact moment and that they had this exact experience. Think of all the things in the world that had to happen to have you have the exact same experiences you have right now at this exact time with your exact DNA made of those exact molecules that make up your body. This is, I think, an impossibility. So the fact that you exist, that I exist, our existence is unique. And this is something that's, I think, more fascinating to think about. Even though, people look in space and I say, look at what we have here. This is impressive. And I think that's something that gets a bit underappreciated.
So do you think that there is a possibility for other species around out of the planet?
I think so. I think just from a number standpoint, if something that's close to, if it's above 0%, if you have infinite space, it's going to happen at some point.
And have you done research or have you studied articles or documentaries related to Antarctica?
No, not so much. Is there anything interesting going on there? I'm not so sure. Maybe you know a bit more.
Yeah, I think you have to, because countries are actually signed not to put any kind of, not to take any kind of chemicals to there. They want to preserve it and want to do research there because they don't want any species to take place, and it's especially for research oriented thing, and that's a very interesting place to know why there are no species and why it has so much ice and so much water here. I mean that gives a lot of information. That's why they are doing already. There are scientists who are working on it. Just I asked you like about the planet. I also wanted to know other place on the planet where there are so many questions that the scientists are thinking about. And last question is. Have you also done, research or studied, the information that has been given by the marine biology experts, like who are finding new species under the water every year?
Oh, no, I was actually going to comment exactly on that. So I don't know much about that research. But, it's funny that we go into space and we're trying to find things in space, which I'm a huge fan of, but we don't even know what's on our own planet. And I think for me, the undersea exploration is so fascinating because there's you could go so deep and we haven't even touched the Earth's surface. Think of the organisms that have evolved and adapted to live under these conditions that we can't even get near. And there you actually have an even higher chances. So, but my understanding is this, because I've always said, okay, we go to space, that's great. Can we finish, exploring Earth? And I've understood that it's actually more difficult to be able to go that deep to explore. So it's actually harder to go deeper on the Earth's surface and to go, which is, kind of counterintuitive, but it's really interesting.
I mean, without light, there are species that are living deeper in the water.
I'd love to. I'm so curious to see how different species get their energy. For example, this is something, as I mentioned, I engineer bacteria to produce electricity from light. These are species that don't get any light. So they probably eat something, and what's able to survive down there. There's a lot of. I'm very curious, but there are experts that do this kind of research, and I'm always interested to learn more from them.
So, can you share your online presence to my audience for listening and for hearing you from anywhere on this planet? They can learn and they can know what you're doing and what you're telling to the world.
So actually, thank you actually for this opportunity and for introducing me to your audience. And if anyone ever wants to get in touch, I'm on Twitter, Ardemis, my first name, and then Prime, Prime. It's kind of a joke of this cartoon anyways, don't hesitate to reach out, and thank you, Sai, for this opportunity.
And what's your observation about my work? You have seen my work on YouTube.
Your videos. I've seen some of the videos. I like the diversity of the people that you've had on there in terms of background, so I tried to keep my discussion a bit broad because I saw also you had some discussion of also, I think it was some cyber and also space. And I was like, I don't know if I fit in, maybe but I like a lot that you go into these different areas. And it's a good way, hopefully, just as it's gotten me interested in their areas, hopefully I could also bring some more people into science. We're always looking for new people. And, even if, just so people know, even if it wasn't your greatest subject, some of the, greatest minds we've had actually didn't do well in their bachelor's, in their high school chemistry. It's very different when you do research. It's a different way of thinking. You don't need to memorize things. You have textbooks. You just have different problem solving skills. So I hope people who might have been discouraged early on, just so you know, it's different when you're doing research. It's not the same kind of skill set. So I hope people consider it as an option, and we're always looking for new talent in the field.
So I have done masters in software engineering, also bachelor's in computer science and engineering. Right now I'm working as a DevOps engineer for a London company from India. So I'm working remotely. So that's my full-time role. Apart from that, I'm actually interviewing experts like you who are into different industries from different parts of the world. More than 100 countries experts I have interviewed for my podcast. The global leaders who are working in technology industry, and also police officers, doctors, engineers, architects, psychologists, like marine biologists and environmental scientists. And I'm going out of my industry and trying to explore what is happening, what they are doing in their life. And I'm just curious what's going on around the world and what different humans and how different they are. Like, I want to be diversified and want to explore and try to understand different humans thinking and the subjects. So how, as an expert, as a person who is into deeper into chemical engineering, so what do you think? What do you say about my chemical engineering? Like, how my chemical engineering is working?
I think you're already a chemical engineer. So chemical engineering is, I joke that we're a little good at everything, but we're not experts on one thing, because we start off, and then once you become interested in something, you become an expert. And just so you know, I work with computer scientists, and I converted them into chemistry because I also work with people who have programming. As I mentioned, machine learning was one of the areas that we work in. And they started to help us find patterns, chemical patterns, so for diseases. And the way that you are thinking is exactly some of the top scientists in our field do that. They always come up with an idea that's completely wacky because they looked in some other field and they said, oh, these people do it differently. Maybe this will work. And this is exactly how, this is a really good skill to have for science. So, I think, as I mentioned, I think you embody what I think is a really powerful skill to have in science.
Do you think that I'm going to contribute something to the planet the next 30 years by interviewing thousands of people like this?
I think so, because already, as I mentioned, you've already had an impact on me. I've already gone to your website. I've already seen other people talk in different areas. And, at some point when you think about philosophy, for example, what I'm doing now is because I have a certain philosophy in my mind of wanting to have an impact. And then I see somebody else, and then it starts to think, oh, maybe I could have an impact in a different way. I've already adapted my philosophy, as I mentioned, when I moved to Switzerland, and I found, okay, over here, they have there's socioeconomic challenges. I could help the women here. They're facing challenges that they don't have in other, Western countries. And so then I found an additional purpose. And I think when you're connecting people from different backgrounds, and then they see things, oh, I could have an impact this way, and they bring a different skill set, a different view, and they might be able to make more progress towards a goal that people have been working on, and it's always the same people working on, but when you have somebody from outside working on this problem, they'll be able to contribute something new.
So I wish your contribution to this planet is going to be very big because of the study that you have done on the kind of information that you're collecting and the way you're working. The projects that you are told is very interesting. One is the wastage, creating electricity from the wastage, and the second one is, helping humans to find new diseases before it affects humans. So I want this to be useful for the humanity, and I believe that after this conversation, you will get support from different, humans or industry leaders or, the people who has bigger network or the community, and maybe the governments if they see this conversation and if they listen to you. And I believe that something going to happen because I believe in energy, and I believe this energy that we had today, is going to contribute definitely and impact, in some way. Thank you for the, energy contribution.
No, thank you, and thank you again for this opportunity. And hopefully we can stay in touch. And I'm very eager to make new connections, whether it is to work together or just to touch base and say hi. I'm always excited to meet new people.
Can I put this video on my YouTube channel and also on my podcast with your permission?
Yeah.
So thank you again, Ardemis, for the opportunity, and keep doing well.
Great, thank you. You too. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm very excited. I think we need more people building these bridges like you are. Thank you.
Thank you again. Bye. Take care.